actually the whole thing that started this conversation, the MMA versus Aikido video.
Okay.
Without being friendly or anything, what are your thoughts about that? How did you feel when you watched it as an Aikido, BJJ? You also have experience in MMA coaching. So what was your perspective on it?
Okay, so initially I was thinking, from my perspective, why did you do it?
Yeah, great.
When I first, I understand after watching it why you did it, and we've had a conversation about it, so it's very clear. Um, and as I said to you, from my perspective, like you don't get into a cage unless you have certain, you know, attributes or certain training. Like, you have to have some striking, you have to have some type of clinching, cage work, some kind of wrestling, judo, BJJ, obviously, anything like that, before you get into the cage. I mean, it's otherwise, like, why would you get into the cage? So why would you get into the cage? That was my first idea. Was like, well, from my perspective, having coached people in MMA, and I was like, so I wouldn't even. There's no way that they'd get into the cage unless they had done so much training and they could keep themselves safe, and they could, number one, they know how to protect themselves, and number two, they have the skills to get into a cage and do mixed martial arts. So that's for me. It's like, but I understand why you did it, and it was obviously a personal thing for you to do, and it gave you an understanding of, a thing that I've always said is like, why would you even think that Aikido should be in a cage? Why would you think it even work in a cage? Because it's not designed to do that. MMA is a sport. It has rules like any sport, and there's certain skills you need to have to do that sport, to compete at any level in that sport. So, Aikido is not designed for MMA. So even to say that like Aikido doesn't work in the cage, yeah, no, it doesn't work in the cage. Why would it? It's not designed to do that. But I understand why you did it. And it gave you some answers. But also, like, it's a wake up call then for people in Aikido to go like, yeah, to think that your Aikido would work in a cage is just silly. But also for MMA people to, I think from my perspective, to actually say Aikido is shit and it doesn't work is bullshit too. That doesn't come across either. That doesn't make any sense to me. Because it is what it is. It's a sport, and it's a tough sport, and but that's what it is. It doesn't go any further than that. It's not a real fight. None of it is. I mean, a real situation is totally different. A real situation is not just about physical, but it's what happens before the physical. But if you just focus on the physical part of a real situation, there's lots of different parameters that are happening. It's not just whether you can defend yourself physically. Like there's other things happening in a real situation. Like there's other people around. There's maybe more than an attacker. There's noise. There's a lot of things happening depending on the environment that you're in. It's a very difficult situation to even comprehend if you've never been in one. So to say that any martial art is better than the other in a real situation, I don't get that personally.
I told you about the panel discussion which happened with Roy Dean, Lenny Sly, Vince Salvatore, and Corky Kickenbush. So we'll have a bit of a different perspective, some more than others. But the topic was, is Aikido a martial art? I wasn't there, so I had no word in it. I watched it when it was recorded, but the subject of the video kept bringing up, and the question came up, which, as I said, I see both sides as having some truth in it. But the question was, okay, so was the failure, quote unquote, in the cage, my failure, was it a failure of the art or a failure of the individual? And some people were more against for one, some people were more for the other part. But so what, could you say a few words? What's your perspective on that?
I don't think, as I said before, I don't think it's a failure of the art. I think the art, you're putting the art into a sport that's not designed to do. It's like asking a soccer player to play rugby. Why would you even do that? It doesn't make any sense. Athletically, he might do something, he might do well, but it's not the same thing. So it makes no.
So it doesn't
So
really say anything about the art itself.
I think it does say something about the art.
So what that is? What
Yeah,
is
but
that?
it doesn't work in MMA. I mean,
Okay,
this
that's
we
different,
know.
isn't it?
It's not designed to do that. But I think but it's a bit of a wake up call too, for even for you personally, to go out like, okay, you put yourself in a situation that someone is throwing strikes at you, and what can you do and what you can't do, what you can do, not necessarily what the art can do. I don't think either of you failed. It's not a fail situation, or you know, for me, it's not a situation like that at all. It's just something that you want to do as an experiment, and it was a personal thing, and there was other reasons why you did it, and that's fine too. But I don't see how it's a failure. I don't think it's bad for Aikido. It just depends on what your perspective is of your martial art. I guess for me, all I hear is like, oh yeah, Aikido is shit. You know, it doesn't work. Or traditional martial arts like this art is shit. Or Wing Chun is shit. And this art's the best art, and that art's for me, it's got nothing to do with the art. I mean, I've studied quite a few arts, as I said. Even the previous interview, I said I've studied lots of arts, and I love martial arts, and I think they all have their attributes. I think they're all good points and bad points. But I think it's up to the individual to say, what do they want from their martial art? Why are you studying this particular martial art? What do you want from it? For example, if you take BJJ, you've got a lot of people who focus on the sport aspects of BJJ, and they don't do any of the self-defense, like Gracie Jiu-Jitsu self-defense part of BJJ. Are they right? Are they wrong? Well, they're not wrong or they're not right. It's just that if this is what they want from their art, they go in there and they enjoy it and they want the sport aspect of it, and they're not interested in self-defense, and they're not wrong. It's just that's what they want. That's their intention behind their art. That's okay. So I think if you want your art to work in a physical confrontation, and you want to be able to defend yourself in a physical, or win a physical confrontation, then you have to look at your art from that perspective, and you can make anything work from that perspective if you want. Like a lot of people say, well, you do BJJ and Aikido, and I go, yeah. And a lot of Aikido people will kind of go, why are you doing BJJ? I go, because I like it.
Like, what's the problem?
What's the problem? I like BJJ. It's a fantastic martial art. I don't see a difficulty with that. They do, but I don't. To me, it's just they're all techniques. It's the intention behind what you're doing. So to me, they're all just techniques. They're just tools that you use, and they're fantastic martial arts. And it's the intention behind what you're doing, and when you go into it. If you go into a conflict, what's your intention in that conflict? That's what you're. What are you studying your martial art for? I'm probably not being very clear, but that's to me is most important. People say, oh, that art doesn't work and this art doesn't work. Well, you need to make your art work if that's what you want it for. There's nothing wrong with most of the martial arts. They're all fantastic. Anyone that I've studied, they're all very effective. You have to make them effective, and if that's what you're looking to do with it, As I say, there's lots of people who train with me, and they're only interested in just coming to the class, enjoying the grappling, maybe competing. A lot of them don't like the self-defense aspect of it. They're not interested. They still do it because I think it's important and it's part of the curriculum, and I think they should know it. And they learn it for those reasons. But I know they don't really focus on it too much. But they're very honest with me, and they say, listen, I really just like the grappling part of it, and I like the sport aspects of it. And I say, well, that's fine, because that's your intention behind what you're doing. So that's perfectly okay with me. I mean, they come and they enjoy it, and there's a great community, and they make lots of friends, and it's a great activity, keeps them fit. So what's wrong with that? And that can be said for every martial art, or any activity. It doesn't matter. It has to be a martial art. That's why I don't get when people just get on and go, this is shit or that shit, or or Aikido is shit. Especially when they've never studied Aikido, that doesn't make any sense to me at all. Because you can't learn anything. It's very hard to learn anything from a video. Videos are good. They're a good source of information. But if you need to physically go and do the art to understand it. So with Aikido, someone saying Aikido isn't a good martial art, it's not effective. Well, have you studied it? And even then, like, if you haven't studied anything for 10 years, I don't see how you really have any real experience in it. For me, anyway. If you look at BJJ, it takes anywhere from 10 to 14, 15 years to get your black belt. It's a long time study. Aikido is a little bit similar, maybe a little bit less for a black belt, but still, it takes a long time to get proficient and really understand the art and what's behind the art.
Something we also touched before, and again, still coming back for a moment to the failure of the art, failure of the individual, I introduced you that I feel the trouble for me was that in Aikido there is a pressure not to train other martial arts, or not to pressure test, not to engage in sparring, and that might sometimes limit the individual. So that brings up the question of cross-training. And in Aikido, it's oftentimes the taboo. You're doing cross-training anyway, but what's your perspective on Aikido and cross-training? Would you recommend that to an Aikido person, or do you see it as a good thing, as a bad thing? That kind of approach that it shouldn't be done in many of Aikidoka's minds.
You don't ask easy questions.
Yeah, no, I don't go for easy questions. Sorry.
Well, no. I mean, it's hard for me to say, I guess, from my perspective, because I've always cross-trained. So I've when I was younger, I started with judo, and then I did several styles of karate until I was in my 20s. So, but I never forgot my judo, and then each style of karate or stand-up kind of martial arts that I did, I never forgot the previous one. So everything that I learned all the way up stood to me, and even my Aikido was influenced by all those martial arts too. And when I took up BJJ, that influenced my Aikido. But the Aikido influenced everything else that I've done. I mean, I can say my kicking and punching changed because of Aikido. And even my BJJ has a huge Aikido influence in it. So to answer your question, should you cross-train? I think that's an individual thing. Do you need to cross-train? I think you need to put yourself in the situations. Well, not you need to, but I think if you're concerned about, can I get out of a headlock? Is Aikido addressing that? If your Aikido is not addressing that situation, just as an example, like a headlock, standard headlock on the ground or standing, is my training addressing that? But if you're concerned about that and you need to know the answer, then put yourself in the situation and figure it out. Can you use the same principles that you've learned? If not, then what's the answer? And so maybe the BJJ, the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu escape for a headlock is very efficient and excellent. And so can I learn that as a tool, keep my Aikido principles in there somewhere with that in mind? I say yes, you can. Do you have to study BJJ for 12 years to do that? No, you don't. So you go and you find the answer, and you take that answer and you use it, if that's what's concerning you. Aikido is a tool to embrace conflict. And as we've discussed before, and Patrick Casti Sensei obviously would say that, can you embrace the conflict with curiosity? Can you stay in the conflict and still be curious about what's going on? Do we have the capacity to do that? Can we evolve to do that? All these questions are very relevant. So again, it comes back to, like, what are you really doing with your martial art? What do you want from it? So to me, I always say to people, I get asked by Aikido people a lot, can you teach me how to get out of this situation? Or what if this happens? Or if someone gets me in a headlock, or someone throws a punch at me like this? Like, what do I do? And I say, well, okay, here's some answers. They're just tools. They're just like techniques. And so I try to teach the techniques, but keep the Aikido principles alive within the way I teach it. Because I'm not teaching BJJ. If I'm teaching pure BJJ, that's what I teach. But if I teach an Aikido and someone wants an answer to a problem, then I try to keep it within the realms of Aikido. And I don't see I see that that's very possible. Well, it's possible because I do it. But I do say to them, you don't have to go and study BJJ. You just have to look for the answer, put yourself in the situation, and see what happens.
You keep mentioning Aikido principles. Since I know Patrick Sensei, and I have a feeling for what you're talking about. But then, I guess a lot of Aikido dojos don't necessarily present principles. They're more about, potentially they're just about techniques. What are these Aikido principles for people who have no clue what you're talking about or just guessing? How would you introduce what Aikido principles means or are?
Well, I think there's a lot of Aikido dojos out there who focus on, are very technique orientated, and they focus on technique, and they don't really go into, I guess the principles are the philosophy behind Aikido and what the founder of Morihei Ueshiba would have his philosophy, and reading his philosophy and trying to work Aikido through those principles and the philosophy of Aikido. I guess a lot of Aikido dojos do, not that they don't focus on our sensei's philosophy, but they do focus just on technique and many variations of the technique, and that's fine, and I don't have a problem with that. But I think it's limited because you're limiting yourself just to one level, and then the next level is, and you can't answer the problem with doing just technique. You can't answer every problem. In a real conflict, you don't know what's going to happen. I mean, people are not going to attack you in this way or that way, or any particular way. You can't stop your attack, like the old joke. You can't stop your attack and say, no, you're attacking me wrong. You have to attack me with this hand, or you have to do it this way. I mean, so that's the old joke. I mean, so you can't cover every single possibility. So, just focusing on technique. And this comes back to what you call that pressure testing in Aikido, where if we're just focused on technique, then we're without connection, without relationship, without relating to the other person, then it's really, it's very limited. And I think where BJJ pressure tests because of grappling. So you learn all your techniques, and then you work in a live situation, and you start grappling, and you're trying to use your techniques in real time. And I think in Aikido, which is what we do, we try to work in a relationship in real time, and the intention behind what we do in Aikido is to stay in that relationship, stay connected with the other person, and examine that in real time. And what can we do when the other person is moving against us and moving with us, or keeps attacking, keeps connecting with us. And so how can I stay there? So it's kind of like, to me, it's a little bit like grappling standing up. Do you know what I mean? That's what it kind of feels like. That it feels like the way we do Aikido is that we're working on this connection and this relationship, and we're staying really present in it. And it's live, it's real time, and it's to keep that focus and keep that curiosity in that relationship going. And I think grappling has a similar feel to it. But it's not necessarily a win-lose situation like grappling can be. I'm not saying all the grappling is like that, because there's sometimes we don't train that way in grappling. But the intention is maybe to get a submission and finish it. Whereas we're not necessarily looking for that in that type of training. It's difficult to explain those principles.
Yeah, no.
That's why you need to come and practice the art and see what it's about.
Right.
And we're very technique oriented. I mean, but if you look on YouTube, every martial art out there shows techniques. Very few of them actually go into the principles. And then those who do, it's not very well understood, because it's very hard to learn those principles from a video. You really have to experience them, because sometimes it's just like two people dancing around each other. That's what it looks like. But when you experience it, it's very different.
Same actually with BJJ. Before I was introduced to it, when you look at it, it's just two people rolling around and just kind of pushing back and forth. It's just like, doesn't look like anything, but there's so much
Going on. Yeah, like if you look at BJJ, if you don't know BJJ, it's very boring. What's going on? I don't know what's going on. That's why if you look at MMA matches, when it goes to the ground, people who don't understand MMA, if you don't know these arts, then it's going to be very boring. It's like, I've been to many MMA in the past, and MMA promotions and MMA fights, and then it would, or shows I should say, and it would go to the ground, and people start booing when it stays on the ground for too long, because they don't really understand what's going on.
And if you do, it's very interesting.
Yeah, of course it is. Yeah, yeah. And sometimes you can't see it because it's on the bottom of a cage. So unless they've got good video and stuff, it's difficult to see. You know, obviously UFC or whatever, the more kind of professional promotions, like everybody can see what's going on. But even then, people don't understand it. So unless they're standing up, kicking and punching, they don't really get what's going on. So yeah, so that's what I'm saying. Videos, you see a lot of Aikido videos up there showing technique, and of course people look at that and go like, what is that? It doesn't make any sense. Of course it doesn't.
Well, honestly, that's one of the reasons why I don't film myself. I made a lot of just beginner way explaining techniques, but I pretty much never filmed principal work that I was introduced to, because I know people would be like, what the fuck is that?
It's really hard to put across. It's even really hard to explain, like, you know, verbally, never mind. You have to experience it. It's all about the relationship and keeping the relationship, and that's what Aikido is about. You know, you're not pushing the conflict away. You're not trying to run away from the conflict. You're trying to, you're trying to embrace the conflict, whether verbally or physically, whatever it might be. You're trying to form that relationship. You're trying to change the intention of the attack towards you. You're trying to, you know, help them understand that it's a misunderstanding. You know, that this conflict is a misunderstanding. That you're not against the other person. It all sounds very kind of, oh, this is wonderful, love, peace, and harmony and stuff like that, but it does make a lot of sense. I mean, just to think about conflict as just, you know, beating the other person, it means the conflict has never been resolved.
Yeah, that person's going to come back at
Look at the
you.
world the way it is now. I mean, up to now, we've had nothing but wars and war after war after war, and there's a lot of conflict in the world, and one army coming and beating another army, the conflict still exists. There's no resolution. It just one party is more powerful than the other. So we're not really evolving as human beings, are we? And it's not working for us. So we have to do something else. We have to try something else. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. So I think this is where Aikido philosophy really, that's what it's about. That's what it tries to put forward. That's what you're trying to study. I'm not saying other martial arts don't do that, because again, it's what do you want from your martial art. There's no reason why other martial arts can't evolve that way. But Aikido really emphasizes that. That's what it's about. That's what it really is. You know. So from day one when you walk in, this is what's behind the martial art, and that's what makes it. That's what's expected. Yeah. Like there's a lot of Aikido people who don't understand why you're doing it. And then MMA, like when I was coaching MMA, it's like they don't get that at all. It's hard for me to explain to them, but really, like Aikido wasn't my first martial art. So, yeah. So for me, I got to Aikido because there was something missing. For me personally, I was looking for something, didn't know what it was, and Aikido answered that for me, you know. And then I found BJJ, and I love BJJ. It's a fantastic martial art. Like, you know, I don't see they both complemented each other. For me, I'm not saying that's for everybody, but for me, they both work. Like BJJ has opened up so many different ideas and avenues that have really enhanced my Aikido. And then my Aikido principles going back into BJJ has really helped me with BJJ. I'm not saying it's helped everybody, but it's helped me. And it's just, there's a way I teach BJJ that it seems to work for me and people who come to me. But not everybody really likes what I do, I'm sure. And that's, you know, that's the way it is. Yeah.
But it works for you, though.
Works for me, yeah. And people seem to like it. You know, and then when I went to my teachers, Phil and Rick Migler's in Philadelphia, and BJJ and I taught my Aikido wrist locks for BJJ. They're so open. They're amazing people. They're a fantastic community, and they loved it. They were like, this is great stuff, you know. So they don't limit themselves, and I think that's with the conversation we were having earlier. Like, it's people limit themselves to their own martial art when there's so many things that are on offer out there that can actually enhance your own martial art. I don't see there's a problem in learning different things. I'm doing some cross training is not a big issue, as long as you're sticking to what you believe in.
Something I'm concerned about, that, as you said, in BJJ, they're hungry for to explore and check other things and see how it works. And sometimes I am wishfully thinking for Aikido to have a bit more of that we would be more curious, because there's sometimes that fear that, okay, if an Aikido person, I don't think there's a big fear in BJJ people that if they try Aikido that they're gonna switch to Aikido. But in Aikido there is that sometimes feeling like, well, we have to stay Aikido because if we try something else that might lure that person away, which I think I feel like as an Aikido person or Aikido people, I think it's something that we should outgrow and not get stuck with the notion that Aikido is only Aikido as long as it's framed and done in just Aikido.
Well, if you look at what we're doing in the evolutionary Aikido, we're really going outside that box with what we're doing. So we're really exploring something else and trying to evolve Aikido. So we're really kind of pushing those boundaries. And I think that's fantastic, and I think that's refreshing, you know. And it's like, from what I believe anyway, what my instructors told me in BJJ, BJJ in America kind of changed a lot because of wrestling. So you got a lot of college wrestlers who didn't have anything else to do after college, and they came into BJJ. So a lot of BJJ adapted for the wrestlers. So that was an enhancement to BJJ. And then, a lot of the leg attacks and stuff like that, like Sambo is big in leg attacks, and shoot wrestling and stuff like that are really big on leg attacks, and BJJ adapted to those things too. So BJJ has evolved from other influences and cross training and other people coming into the arts. I don't see it as a bad thing, but BJJ has never lost its focus. It's still BJJ, and I don't see why Aikido can't do some of that and not lose its Aikido-ness.
Which is really what came up to me right now is what it's interesting, I found very interesting, is that, BJJ, literally Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and it evolved so much, and it's become an international, worldwide phenomenon, and it's practiced in everywhere, even in, I presume, in Japan, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, although Jiu-Jitsu comes from Japan. But then this is funny and interesting that, so it evolved, and it has pretty much not so much anymore to do, in my perspective, and please correct me if you disagree, that it pretty much doesn't have so much to do with Brazil anymore, but it's still Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So it's like it allowed so many things in, and it evolved and transformed, but that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is still Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which I feel as Aikido people, I'm sometimes, or in general, just try to do my best to speak for the we. I feel there's sometimes a fear that, okay, again, if we let things in Aikido, it's not going to be Aikido anymore. But funny enough, it seems it does stay that. We all still love and appreciate the Gracies, and it's still Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu because it started as Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And I feel Aikido has the potential to be that too. Aikido is Aikido, even if new things come into it, which is a bit of a taboo still.
I think it's a bit of a taboo because I think what we've seen, and we've discussed this before, I think what we've seen is that there's a lot of Aikido out there that feel there's a lot of Aikido out there that feel they need to do something else. They need to change the Aikido in order to compete with all the other martial arts, to prove themselves that Aikido is effective, is a martial art. Yes, we can use it in the cage, this type of stuff. And I think some of Aikido people have kind of, if they might think of stepping up to the challenge and changing their Aikido and say, we can do this and we can do that and we can be strong. And I'm probably not explaining this very well, but there's a lot of people who are being challenged by the opinions of other people out there on their Aikido. And I can understand that. But then they're falling into the trap of, I need to change my martial art, I need to do Aikido in this way in order for it to be effective. So I think that's losing sight of what Aikido is. Yeah, like what is Aikido for? What's again. We've struggled with trying to kind of like, okay, let's put a definition on Aikido. We all struggle with it because people see it as like this mystical thing, because it's very much if when we do Aikido, it is all about that relationship. It's about you know, really getting involved and feeling that relationship. And it's like any martial art. You can watch it as much as you want, but until you actually get on the mat and do it and try it out, then you really don't know what it's about. But I think there's a lot of Aikido dojos out there who are trying to, you know, prove it to be something else, something that maybe it's not. And so that'll change the art, for sure. As I say, Aikido is not designed to go into MMA, into the cage. It's not designed to do that.
And it shouldn't.
It shouldn't. Yeah. So don't do it. I'm saying you shouldn't have done it, but I'm saying like
Yeah, just in general.
it's just not. It's not supposed to. Of course, they're not going to work. But there's principles in there that, of course, will enhance your MMA if you want. But enhance your jiu-jitsu. There's principles there that really do work. Not work, but they do work. They're effective. They are what they are. You know, staying connected with somebody. But BJJ people do that all the time. When when they grapple, a lot of times they're staying connected. They're moving, and you know what the other person gives them. It's the same idea, more or less. You know, same principles physically are there.
It does seem that what is special about Aikido and should be preserved is the intention, and it should be clarified potentially. Maybe it's not always as clear in everyone.
Yeah, I think we definitely need to clarify the intention behind Aikido, even for ourselves. And I think, well, we're working on that. I mean, for sure, that's something. I mean, I think it's a tool to embrace conflict is one aspect, you know, definitely looking at it from that perspective, like embracing conflict and you know, trying to resolve conflict without there being a winner and a loser. And for a lot of people, that's kind of like, that doesn't exist. How's that going to work? You know, so but that's what we're trying to do.
And the second part I wanted to add is that we shouldn't be afraid of, as Aikido people, we shouldn't be afraid of, as long as we maintain that intention, that we shouldn't be afraid to let the influence of other arts or techniques be there, but not to exchange Aikido's intention or Aikido for them.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So I don't think that you need to go out and study a martial art. I just do it because I'm a student of martial arts and I love martial arts. That's why I do it. There's no other reason other than that. So, yeah, but I think if you want to find a solution to a problem, and if you don't have that solution, then go and find the information and make it work. So what's wrong with that? It doesn't necessarily going to change your whole art. It just means there's something that you have a difficulty with, and you need to solve it. That's it.
Your wish for the community, global community of Aikido, in order to go to the next step, to establish its ground, and to be at a good space, what would be your wish or feeling that what would help do that? Sorry for my questions. Like, what do you feel would be most beneficial for Aikido to further evolve and develop?
I just think be very clear on what your intention is. I mean, I've said that word so many times now, I'm like a broken record.
That means it's so important.
Yeah, but be very clear about what you're doing. You know, get more involved in the philosophy behind Aikido. You know, study it, ask questions about it for people who know. People who've been around a long time doing Aikido, like, you know, research them. There's lots of fantastic podcasts out there now and online, and stuff that Miles has done recently. It's been amazing to have all those fantastic teachers there interviewing them, and it's out there. You know, have a listen to what they have to say. They've been around a long time, you know, and really get behind that, and figure out what you really want from Aikido. You know, I think just to be more clear on what you're doing. You know, don't get caught up with other people's opinion of the art. That's really a big thing. You know, for me, I don't really care because I'm very clear on what I'm doing. So that's a personal thing for me. I mean, if someone has, I know what Aikido is for me, and so I know why I'm doing it. So, you know, I'm very clear on that. I think that's really important. And if you're not clear, then get clear. And if it turns out it's not for you, then that's fine. You know, if it's not answering the questions that you're asking, then maybe you need to ask somebody else or ask different questions. But yeah, I think so. I mean, just to give a short answer, you know, be very clear about what you're doing, about why you want to do what you're doing and stuff like that. I think we get caught up again. What I said earlier was getting caught up with, like, you know, blaming the martial art. You know, I think that's just an easy way out. It really is. To me, it's very easy to blame martial art, to blame the martial art. You know, look at yourself. You know, if you really like Aikido, you want to make it work for you, whatever you want from it. But then again, you really need to understand what it's designed to do a certain thing. You know, maybe that's not what you're looking for. You know, so trying to change it to make it work for what you want, maybe that's not the answer. Maybe you need to do something else. So you have to really dig. You know, you have to be very honest with yourself and look at it from that perspective. Lighten up.
That's a good one.
Seriously, lighten up. Yeah, you know, don't be afraid to fail and laugh at yourself too. You know, that's in general, I guess. But
Yeah,
you know, from a martial art point of view, yeah, lighten up.
it's not super present in Aikido, unfortunately. The lightning.
Well, a lot of martial arts, not just Aikido, but yeah, we're talking about Aikido, so it does exist a lot, yeah. You know,
This thing springs up, so I can't refrain from not asking. So the people, and continuing the question, the people who doubt. So there are many Aikido people who have the doubt. So does my Aikido work? And they want to maybe test it out and prove, or well, you spoke about the wanting to prove a bit, but people who have doubts if Aikido works. I mean, we have our clear relationship with that question, but there's many people who train Aikido, but they're afraid that someone will prove that it doesn't work, or they want to prove it works for themselves. The ones who have doubts, what would you suggest to those people?
yeah, but the whole thing about does it work? Does it work? What do you mean? What do we mean by does it work? That's the problem. Like, does it work? If someone throws a punch at you, does it work? You know, if someone grabs you in a headlock, does it work? If someone tries to attack you with a knife, does it work? You know, that's a question that every martial art has to asks. You know, if that's what you mean by does it work. But when we look at a conflict, we always, and I said this in the last interview that I did with you, if we look at conflict, we're always looking at the physical aspect of the conflict. We're not looking at what happens before that. And like, how does it, when it gets to the physical part, it's already too late. It really is. I mean, we have to look at how did it get there in the first place? What happened within this relationship with the other person to make it, to get it to this point of a physical conflict. So obviously there could be a verbal conflict before this. It could be different reasons, you know, it could be just someone mugging you, whatever. But even then, you know, your awareness of your environment, your awareness of yourself, you know, what was there before that to maybe not let it get it to this point of escalation into a physical conflict. That's what I would look at. But if we just talk about, so for Aikido really looks at that. So Aikido looks at the relationship within your environment, with the people around you. This is what Aikido really looks at. If I'm a very confident fighter, maybe I won't bother trying to de-escalate someone. Maybe I'll just go and I'm pretty good. I can fight really well. So I'm not going to even bother de-escalating. This guy talks to me funny, looks at me funny. I'm just going to smash him in the face because I'm pretty confident about what I can do. But for me, that's a crazy attitude to have. So Aikido looks at, you know, how to not get there in the first place. That's what we really look at. And then if it does get physical, well then that's it. Who knows? So my answer is that you don't know until it happens. Every encounter is going to be different. There's all sorts of things happening around you. The environment that you're in, you don't know what you can't say. You know what I mean? You can only practice these things that worry you in the dojo as best as you can and hope that it works. So, and that's with every martial art. So you can practice as you know, if it's a physical thing, like someone throws a punch at me, is this technique going to work? Well, then you just have to try and practice it as best as you can. If that's what's concerning you, if that's a question that you need answered, then go and do it and see what happens. And if it doesn't work, you'll soon find out because you'll get punched in the face, which is fine.
Exactly. Yeah. I get.
You know?
Yeah. Because I think again,
which is what happened to you in the cage. You got punched.
Right. No, yeah, totally.
Which is okay. I mean,
yeah, but that is.
You're still here today talking to me.
Yeah.
So you know, I don't see a problem with if that's what if they're the answers you're looking for, then go and find them.
Right. That's a very good one. I find that, and I feel that as the guy who was doing the more or less traditional Aikido, didn't have much background in other martial arts, especially in modern martial arts, and I went to that cage. The problem is, I remember myself doing these Aikido techniques, you know, Yokomenuchi, Shomenuchi, and same techniques again and again, and hoping that these, and that was the doubt, that was the guessing, like, okay, if I do this over and over again, and the doubt would come, so will it work, will it not? And I would do my best to believe it will work, but truthfully, I'm not preparing for what I am having doubts about. You know, I'm doing these things and it will work in these things, but and just to put it simply, yeah, I really like what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, that was in a cage, and then it has a, you know, that's not a real scenario. It's just in a cage with someone who's experienced in doing mixed martial arts. In a real fight, in a real situation that goes to a physical conflict, you don't know what's going to happen. So it's very difficult. You just have to, you know, it doesn't matter how much you train. Every situation is going to be different. Every real situation is going to be different in that physical part of the conflict. You know, there could be more than one person. You could be sucker punched. Someone could take you from. You don't know what's going to happen. You just have to hope that you can respond. You know what I mean? And there's only so many ways you can train for that if that's what worries you. You know, so none of us really know until it happens to us. You know, and even then, when it does happen to you, and you came out okay, you survived, because that's what, you know, in a real physical conflict, like, it's about survival, not winning. That's the other thing. It's your mindset. It's really about the mindset, and it's about your awareness and your focus. Can you stay focused with all these pressures? You know, noise, lots of people, maybe one or two attackers, maybe being sucker punched, maybe being hit by one guy, someone else coming at you, maybe a weapon involved. Can you keep your focus? Can you stay present in that moment? And can you survive? That's really what you're talking about. And that's not going to happen in a cage. That's not going to happen in a grappling match. It's not going to happen in the Aikido dojo. So, you know.
Almost the wrong question, I guess.
Yeah. So does it work, to me, is a kind of a silly question. You know, you just have to train. You can only train as best as you can. So, like, you know, some pressure testing isn't such a bad thing. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's a good thing to do. I don't think it should take over your whole martial art and take over your everyday training. I just think some pressure testing every so often is a good thing to do. I think it's a sensible thing to do. I don't see anything wrong with it. It shouldn't change your art. It should change you.
Yeah.
You know, it'll change your focus. You know what I mean? Physically, anyway, and mentally, like, you know, someone coming at you a bit more for real than normal in the dojo. You know, you try to do obviously as safe as possible. You know, so that's the other thing. You have to train safely. It makes no sense not to. So, but you know, there's no harm in upping the pressure every so often. That's a good thing to do. But for me, it's the conflict is trying to resolve the conflict before it gets to a physical. And even if it does get to a physical, and this is where Aikido techniques are designed to try and still resolve the conflict physically. It's not a win-lose situation. I don't have to smash him. I don't have to kill him. The Aikido techniques are designed to still resolve the conflict physically. So that's what we're trying to do. That's our intention.